guys, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm gonna react to Jordan Peterson. Now, I have these 5 videos up here that I put here specifically. Recently, backstory of Jordan Peterson. Of course, he's a clinical psychologist. I definitely like him and what he does. Right, I like how he's definitely honest and how he was able to make like a difference, changing my life, not just my life for the lives of others as well. But specifically recently, he has been battling with a condition that's been pretty much like affecting his like mental health recently. So of course I have these 5 videos. I'm not gonna go too full deep into it, but I'm gonna react every single one of them and just read the updates as well, right? So let's see this how it goes. I have the videos link in the description you guys want to check out, but yeah. Anyway, let's get into the
Yo, I think Jordan Peterson might be dead. Nobody's talking about this.
Nobody's talking about him?
He's been out of the public eye for how long? His daughter said that he supposedly was black mold poisoned or something, and we haven't seen or heard anything about him in.
Yeah. He was definitely like not been uploading since the beginning of 2026, and I didn't even realize where was he during this whole entire time, right? Because of course I had to deal busy with school and college and stuff, right?
In months? Has it been over a year? Like, he could be like in a fucking coma again. Nobody knows. Oh, Michaela posted. Don't. Oh, this is 2 months ago. Don't count this as an official update, but Dad is finally feeling better. Praise God. Thank you for the prayers. I feel like I can smile again. Tentatively. Wow. And this is another update. Dad's back. Wait, this was 3-ish months ago?
Hey guys, brief update on my dad, because I know a lot of you have reached out and asked, and been waiting for one. As have we, obviously. I don't have a lot to say because everything's been slow. He's still very unwell, but he's not in hospital. I'm seeing him every 8 hours, which is really nice. We're working with very specialists and
There's a code for if you got bit by a turtle, but there isn't a code for if you have mold-related illness.
and also if you think back,
Is this the new bullshit that I need to be more research on? I guess there's probably specific types of illnesses you can get from certain molds, but they don't just have it. These guys are probably, I've heard her talk about this in the past. There's this like epidemic of black mold that grows in homes that nobody tests for, and it's making America sick. It's like microplastics for your balls, except now it's black mold for your lungs or something.
over the last like 200 years, there have been decades where people have been exposed to certain chemicals without knowing they were making them sick. There have been decades where people have been exposed to certain chemicals without knowing they were making them sick. So lead, people were putting on their face and makeup because they didn't know it was making them sick. And it was only banned in gasoline in the 80s because they figured out, oh,
So it has been like a theory that that Jordan Peterson got CIRS, the CIRS, which is basically a mold illness, right? So that's why with Michaela Peterson doing the podcast, they have she has been like inviting people, specifically expert in these ones, and especially mold illnesses and CIRS, just to try to at least have some knowledge of why Jordan Peterson were like this, right?
we can't have lead in gasoline because that makes people sick. It's one type of information. So people have been exposed to biotoxins repeatedly. But then you grow up with AI and you're like, well, we don't have that anymore. Ariana, welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Michaela, excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk about this. Before we get started, so we're going to cover mold, amongst other things, immune system issues. But I wanted to, I've done this before on my podcast like a long time ago, but I wanted to bring on to talk because I think that this is a like bigger problem for people to know about than diet. I know it's missing a lot of the biohacking spheres. They're kind of onto it. It's not a major focus. And I think mold, people's awareness of mold really needs to grow because it's everywhere and it's making a lot of people sick. They're being misdiagnosed with random autoimmune symptoms. So I brought you here to talk about what you're doing and what you went through and what people can do to fix it out. So I guess can we start off by you just doing a bit of an intro about who you are and what did you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summarized that super well, so thank you for teeing that up. So hi, Ariana, founder and CEO of Moldco. I'm here from a personal health journey, so started off as a patient first, and prior to starting Moldco, was a chemical engineer, also built a venture capital firm really focused on this intersection of consumer and science. So in a strange way, it felt like so many of these events in my life led to building Moldco, and I'm really excited to just provide value for humanity in this way.
So what happened? You were a chemical engineer and you started VC?
Yeah, I started a firm called Conscious.
I received my CRS treatment. Where is it? Through Moldco. What is CRS? Chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Always chronic because it's always effective over a long period of time. Always inflammatory because inflammation is just the broadest fucking thing in the universe. Always syndrome because they have no idea what the fuck is ever causing it. So it's the new chronic Lyme disease. The new, was it myencephalitis or whatever? I mean, the mold. It's worth saying too. The question of global beehives failing was solved with fungus as well. The bees could be directly exposed to the relevant pesticides and leptins and nothing. Never mind. Okay, I don't need to get triggered about this. Destiny. Dr. D.
So I've never been like an expert in this, of course, this disease, but of course I know that I definitely know that like both Michaela and Jordan, they're meat eaters, like the carnivore diet, right? The lion diet specifically. I think specifically the lion diet because it's more very strict, right? Right. And they definitely eaten this their whole entire lives, right? And of course, it's definitely backed by science. They definitely had a lot of expert people on the podcast. I think Dr. Sean Baker as well, right? So, yeah. So, they definitely have family history, genetic history of any chronic inflammatory diseases. And yeah.
X code. Oh, fibromyalgia. Sorry. The ICD-10 CM code is E77.120 is used for contact with and suspect exposure to mold toxic. Effective as of October 1st, 2025. Maybe this was recorded. Maybe they did this research earlier. That's pretty recent though.
Since CC early stage.
Okay, let's do one zip ahead. Let's see what awesome shit we're talking about.
There's a holy grail opportunity, but I think it's coming, and now with more national attention on this issue, I think there's going to be a whole crop of founders and entrepreneurs and builders really trying to help humanity in this way. So I'm really excited about that, and maybe this won't be such an enormous problem where we just want to turn a blind eye and not even address it at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, things are looking a lot more promising than they were 3 years ago. Like, you popped up, so now people can get help.
Wait, what is this? Hold on. So grateful for the shoemaker protocol. I've been suffering from CFS and fibromyalgia. There it is for 25 years. Michaela's the reason I figured out that CRS was my root cause, and the protocol completely changed my. Wait, what is the protocol? Oh shit! How treatment protocols like the shoemaker approach work in practice?
Search, and that includes lab testing. So we do the shoemaker biomarkers, which includes the high signal lab test for immune and inflammatory markers related to disorders. That includes MMP9, MSH, TJ.
Like, I think these people believe that mold is the secret cause of tons of different diseases and everything else is being diagnosed in an incorrect manner, and it's actually all related to mold shit or whatever. It's probably makers daily practice. Other illness is caused by exposure to biologically produced toxins. Oh, that's maybe a biotoxin is a thing that's produced by some organic thing maybe, or some creature or fungus. Other illness is caused by exposure to biologically produced toxins are quite similar in their final common pathway. What this means is that while the illness might begin acutely with exposure to fungi, spirochetes, spirochetes, apicomplexans, dinoflagellates, and cyanobacteria, for example, in its chronic form, each of those illnesses has similar symptoms. Oh, in its chronic form. Ooh, we love chronics around here. Each of those illnesses have similar symptoms, lab findings, and visual contrast sensitivity findings. Taken together, the inflammatory illness from each of these diverse sources is known as a chronic inflammatory response syndrome. The few sentences above might make one think the path of discovery of the complex abnormalities of innate immune psychology or physiology now confirmed to be present was simple. Frankly, none of the players, as one might call C4A, TGF, beta 1, and MMP9, or the genetic susceptibility from immune response genes HLA-DR was known in 1997. Now that's what I call a cool fucking story, bro. Destiny, have an open mind. I was warned about mold before my NHS doctor gave me my immunosuppressant injections. Well, that sounds like because mold generally shouldn't cause diseases in healthy people. I think mold can cause disease. I don't think anybody doubts that. And I think there are some types of mold that can cause really bad diseases if you are inhaling this stuff for a long period of time. But the idea that, like, I think these people believe that mold is the secret cause of tons of different diseases and everything else is being diagnosed in an incorrect manner, and it's actually all related to mold shit or whatever is probably. I'm gonna go on a link here and say probably bullshit. Fuck, why am I clicking these?
I mean, mold is like naturally bad for us, right? Mold has been naturally bad for us, right? So
easier to be sick than to be well. As a clinician, I'm day out taking care of people. I want them to feel better. That's something to do every day. That means pathological you go through. Start with diet on the surface.
Meat. What is the lion diet? Is this like the upgraded version of carnivore? What is the lion diet? Why diet research is rare medicine. Do you think it's going to be because greedy pharmaceutical companies can't make money selling you food? Let's find out.
Because on the other hand, we have so much abundance. We have so much relative comfort. We have so much comfort that I think about this I artificially stress and de-stress myself and go work out.
I know. I talk about it too. It's like you have so much that you actually have to go to the gym instead of just having to work.
Instead of just being a part of. And look, I've chosen a particular career and we try to build our lives in a way. But I mean, that's a joke. But yeah, it's like artificially trying to meditate, yoga, whatever practice that you not only good nervous system, also trying to train, and we just don't have lives there. It's naturally built into the activities and environments that we can use for our health. And so food becomes even more important. And we're reaching a place where just removing gluten, just removing processed foods, it gets people somewhere. But we're dealing with a mess. And so we're actually having to entertain. To me, an elimination diet, processed foods are good. I haven't really think about it. I'm eliminating elimination. Like, we're not talking about eliminating some whole food.
All processed foods? Every single?
Probably has some nutritional benefit in some context, but we're doing it for this purpose, for this individual. And that's crazy to me. We're that generally sick and dealing with such a burden of metabolic disease or chronic autoimmune inflammatory disease. These things funnel you back to food, and you realize there's no money in studying these things because they're not patentable.
There's no money in studying food and diet related stuff. Like, there's not a whole fucking wellness industry that sells billions of dollars worth of products and services to people that think they have these imaginary diseases. Okay, buddy.
We're talking about different kinds of food, but that's what really matters. And that's not the stuff that's getting academic institution.
yeah, I definitely talked a lot about the lion, not the lion diet, but the carnivore diet specifically, right? I made a video on that one as well, right? And there's definitely like a lot of benefits with it, specifically how it reduces the inflammation, provides us energy, makes us lean, as well as the most important one, treating chronic inflammatory autoimmune diseases.
The grants are not for these kinds of things. Like, there are people
Big
in
grants.
institutional settings. Dr. Jerry Wallace here, so much credit for really pushing forward and funding. It's just not being done there. So
There's no research, et cetera, et cetera. The next big thing, in 2024, I did gut treatment with Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's team, who I will have on the podcast. So it was environmentally caused, but I hadn't realized at the time it happened. I didn't realize your environment, purely your environment impacts your vitamins, but I mean, it's even more obvious now. So the vitamins, and most of them that were B vitamins, was it just B vitamins? Yeah, and it flattened my hormones were all messed up too. But that recovered actually pretty quickly when I got pregnant anyway. But the vitamins recovered after serious treatment. I still supplement folate acid. In the last 2 years, I had 2 babies under 2, which is so hard.
Hospice care. John, California has 1/3 of, forget about Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles.
Finish. Now we can sail to Finland, which is why it's a Finnish canal.
Surprised me how much.
Yeah, everything else is, of course, there's a lot of unnecessary stuff. But of course, I have the link in this video down in the description down below. The next one is by Dr. Joseph, the hidden brain injury by Jordan Peterson. So let's react to this one.
Currently, Dr. Jordan Peterson is very ill, and I'm speculating that some of what is going on now may be related to a severe and under-recognized adverse reaction to a benzodiazepine that he experienced back in 2020. And so in today's video, I want to explain what that reaction is, how it can unfold, and most importantly, what you need to know to reduce the risk of this happening to you or someone that you care about. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Joseph Wittering. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. I used to work at the FDA, and I'm an expert in adverse reactions to psychiatric side effects. Let's get into it. Now, everything that's happened with Dr. Peterson has surrounded a class of medications called benzodiazepines. These are sedative medications that slow the brain down. And common benzodiazepines are things like Xanax, Klonopin, and Valium. Now, these drugs are typically given out for anxiety and depression. However, because they cause a physiological dependence, most doctors do not recommend taking them long-term. And this didn't just happen to Dr. Peterson. This is in fact happening to many Americans around the country. Because as you can see in this graphic here, which shows all the psychiatric medication use, for both women here on the left and for men, this sort of red dotted line that you're seeing here, this represents benzodiazepines. And as you can see, these are the second most commonly prescribed psychiatric medications out there. And so if we look over here, if you're age 50 and female, roughly 10% of women over age 50 are on these medications. And then for men, roughly 5% of men over age 50 are on these medications. That's 1 in 20. Now, the first thing I want to show you is Dr. Peterson explaining to Joe Rogan how he got on these medications to begin with. Let's go.
What was stressful when I first got, I've had a history of depression, and that runs in my family, and that probably stems back from me right to the time when I was a kid. And I think when I really got sick in 2016, it was partly a manifestation of that. But at the time, my job was threatened. like actually.
Right, yeah.
And my clinical practice was threatened. And the Canadian Revenue Agency was after me all at the same time. And they were after me because of a mistake they made, which they admitted 3 months later. And the college was after me because of a vindictive client who came after me with a pack of lies, but because they were so, and basically I emerged from that unscathed, but that was by no means obvious that that was going to be the case. I was accused of sexual misconduct. And the evidence, when I was dealing with this client, I would turn my wedding ring around.
You'd spin it?
Well, I play with it.
Right. And that was sexual misconduct?
Yeah, well, to her it was a signal of some dark underlying desire that that was polluting our therapeutic relationship.
So unfortunately, when you're dealing with people that are extremely troubled, oftentimes they look for external reasons why they're troubled, and they find oppressors.
Well, she was also angry with me because when all this blew up around me, it interfered with my clinical practice, and she had come to rely on our weekly meetings.
Oh,
so she was angry about being abandoned, and it was really sad because I didn't want to abandon my clients, but I had to stop my clinical practice, which was also very upsetting to me because I had like 20 clients, and I knew these people, man. Like I knew these people.
Yeah.
You know, I'd followed them through thick and thin, and then all of a sudden, so many things piled up around me that.
Yeah, so this one is more about his benzodiazepine use. It's more about his like mental condition issue. So it could be played a part of it from the recent of the chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So
I found when I was in a clinical session that I was distracted. So you can't be distracted in a clinical session.
Right.
And so, anyways, what emerged from that, and it was in the middle of winter, and I had seasonal affective disorder, I couldn't sleep at all for quite a long time. And I went to my doctor and I said, I can't sleep. And he gave me a sleeping medication and an anti-anxiety drug. And I took a little bit of the anti-anxiety drug and I could sleep.
So that was Klonopin, 0.25 milligrams twice a day.
And my life was pretty stressful. And I thought, okay, I'm much better. I'm just going to leave this be. This is working.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. And my main commentary on this is so human and completely understandable. So Dr. Peterson, he has a history of depression. He's talked about it for a long time. Also some autoimmune problems as well. And so he's got that in the background. But on top of that, in 2016, he experiences unprecedented levels of fame because he really is sort of pushing back against a woke agenda, and it's around the whole transgender issue. He gets thrown into the international spotlight. His work is threatened, tax situations, clients are unhappy, not able to focus, struggling to sleep. When all of these things pile up on you and you can't sleep and you're feeling awful and you can't even focus at work, most of us would want to reach out for a medication. And Jordan Peterson's been very open. He's taken antidepressants before, and so he's familiar with that. So it's really easy to see how he ends up on this medication. He just starts taking it, trusting it because he's taken other psychiatric medications in the past. So I'm going to jump forward now and show you some clips from a different interview that he did with his daughter, Michaela. And just to provide a timeline, Jordan becomes really famous in 2016. And this interview with Michaela that you're about to see, I believe it's in 2020. So he's on the medication for about 4 years when he starts to get really, really sick. And the condition that he's experiencing is a condition called BIND. It stands for benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction. And essentially, it's a type of neurotoxicity that happens when you take benzodiazepines long term. This does not happen in everyone, but there is a substantial minority of patients where this drug actually hurts their brain over time and they get sicker. Almost like chemotherapy or some kind of toxic reaction. It actually damages neurons and people feel sicker over time. Now, as you can see here from this article from Alexis Ritvo and the Colorado Consortium, these are academics out of Colorado, benzodiazepine-induced neurological dysfunction has only been recently identified. And so this article was published in 2023. Now, this has been going on for a long time, but it's only experienced widespread recognition recently. And this condition causes several symptoms. I'm going to go over some of them that you'll see here in this article. Now, here's a table of all of the symptoms. The symptoms are listed on the left, and on the right, you see duration of symptoms where survey respondents, there's been 1,200 of them who have suffered from this condition, have rated in percentages how long it lasted for. So, if this one says 51%, so this means 51% of people experienced low energy for years. And so there are a few symptoms here from BIND that I want to bring your attention to, because this is things that Jordan has talked about experiencing. So firstly is akathisia, this need to move around in pace. You'll hear him describe that. We also have things like balance problems, heart rhythm irregularities, or blood pressure issues.
So I've definitely been very known, of course, definitely know this medication a lot of benzodiazepines. It's usually for alcohol withdrawal, and the common ones are like lorazepam, diazepam, and of course, it's just meant to kind of reduce the alcohol withdrawal symptoms, which calms them down basically. And of course, it's almost like it acts like a sedative and opioid that you don't give them too much, and don't put them long term, because they won't breathe as normal, right? And that could like lead to kind of they would have difficulty breathing basically, right? So he's just explaining like the whole he just explained the medication itself, right?
And this can make it seem like you're dying of another condition. A lot of people don't relate this back to benzos. There are things like stabbing pains, burning, aching sensations, or joint pains. Many of these patients have neurological symptoms in their hands. They feel numb, sleep disturbances as well, difficulty focusing, sensitivity to noise and light. There are a whole host of very uncomfortable symptoms that hit people who suffer from this condition. Now, when we listen to this report shortly, you'll notice that Jordan slowly notices the onset of this toxicity. He starts to feel worse. He'll actually describe feeling weak, detached, and feeling less joyful, and then experiencing very severe anxiety. He's also going to report that when he goes into a higher dose, it makes him worse, which is a sign that he's having a drug toxicity. Because usually if you're taking an anti-anxiety med like Klonopin, if you go to a higher dose, your symptoms of anxiety go down. But if you do that and you get worse, it's a sign the drug is toxic to your nervous system. Anyway, let's jump into it and have a listen to him talking to his daughter.
But I took the benzodiazepine the way that it was prescribed, twice a day, 0.25 milligrams. And that seemed to bring the symptoms to a pretty rapid halt, which is also part of the reason I didn't need the Innovate. And then there were so many other things going on around me at that time that I never really thought about it again. I thought that it was a relatively harmless drug, and I was taking it in a prescribed fashion at not too high a dose. And I developed symptoms that I now recognize were associated with its use. Weakness on my left side, and like a feeling of detachment from people around me, people I loved, some decrease in the ability to experience joy. But it wasn't until much later that I actually associated with benzodiazepine use.
Yeah. Well,
And well, when your mom got so sick, my anxiety levels had been climbing up again.
yeah, that was unbearable. I mean, the response I had, if you're told your parent or your wife of almost 30 years has no chance and is going to be dead in the next 10 months. That's what we were told. That
Yes.
surgery doesn't help and that chemo doesn't help and that this is a fast-growing cancer and you're screwed no matter what. That's
Right.
what we heard in one day. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, then we
anxiety.
went all over North America, to New York and to Houston and to LA, looking for different opinions before we decided to settle on surgery. But
And everyone gave us the same opinion.
yes, which was that nothing is going to help, but surgery was probably the best low probability bet.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I asked my doctor to increase the benzodiazepine dose, but what seemed to happen as a consequence of that was that I just got more anxious. Like, so again, in retrospect, it seems like I had a rather uncommon but not unheard of reaction.
And there's always like these withdrawal medications with benzodiazepines, right? If you suddenly stop taking them, you feel more agitated, restless. You feel like your anxiety is coming back, right? You have a high chance of getting seizures, right? All those stuff, right? And it's definitely hard to, take these types of medications, these psychopharmacology medications, and you can't take them too long, or you can't like suddenly stop them because it's always worse, right? So
To benzodiazepines, where increased dose makes anxiety worse instead of better. So then at one point when things weren't getting better and Tammy was still in the hospital, I was trying to take care of her. We had lots of help. I stopped taking them entirely.
Okay, so let's stop there for a second. So to recap, I mean, at this point when his wife gets diagnosed with cancer, he's been on them for several years now. It's probably around 3 years. Already, in retrospect, he's noticing the drugs making him worse. The anxiety increases understandably because his partner is potentially going to die.
That's much less true than everybody who's taking them hopes.
Now,
Yes,
so barbiturates were the common anxiety
so-
sedatives people used to use.
Complete bloody lie.
Yeah. Well, what we figured was we didn't realize that there was this physical dependency until you stopped.
yeah, it's definitely like playing a part of with definitely the psych meds, right? Especially like at his like age, right? He's higher risk of developing polypharmacy, right? There's definitely these higher risks that these doctors and these nurses have to monitor because he is technically that older adult, right? So they have to carefully monitoring him because, of course, he's more of that higher risk, right? So
Experience was intolerably dreadful.
I mean, you can hear it in his voice and see it in his face that he stared at death when he was going through this. And you can tell, if not for his family, he wouldn't have made it. Now, this is the reality of what this is for many people, and we lose many people to this condition. Many people will take their life, but the ones that make it through, generally their family hold them and carry them across the finish line, kicking and screaming. These people don't want to exist when this is happening, and it takes every ounce of family support to make it through this. Now I'm going to jump forward a little bit in the story, but long story short, Jordan Peterson is in Serbia or Russia. They put him on propofol, that's that heavy anesthetic that killed Michael Jackson, and they sedate him for like 9 days. And while that's going on, they remove the drug again. I would not recommend it done that way, but that's just the way it happened. And
Because this is too hard to explain off the cuff, so I wrote it out. This summer's been exceedingly difficult. Dad was in an ICU suffering from pneumonia and sepsis after dealing with a host of neurological issues this summer that we believe stem from CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome due to decades of mold exposure. We don't have a better explanation for his neurological symptoms at the moment other than spiritual attacks.
I've seen this with some of my patients where after they get benzo injured and then nervous system is sensitized, they start reacting, you could start reacting to mold, you can start reacting to different types of foods and things like that. And so he may have been able to handle this before, but now it's affecting him at a much greater level. That's my speculation.
He's been suffering for the last number of years with unexplainable neuropathy and weakness,
So it's definitely the benzodiazepines playing a role here.
amongst other symptoms, but they worsened this summer after he cleaned out his parents' basement after his dad, my grandpa, passed away. We weren't able to communicate with Dad really all of September. During the end of the pneumonia, he was diagnosed with critical illness polyneuropathy, which we're hoping is critical illness myopathy, which is bad enough. That's been heartbreaking and brutal on top of everything else. But after almost a month in the ICU, he's been moved out to a less urgent floor.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this video there. So guys, this is speculative. I don't know anything about his condition other than what Michaela is sharing here.
Yeah, overall, good video. Of course, I have this the video linking down in the description below. Now let's go to the October 2025 Jordan Peterson health update. So I think this started around, I believe, the middle of 2025, right? Almost on that winter time. So of course he reacted this type of video, but let's go to a more deeper part, right?
Hey guys, I have an update on my dad. I'm actually just going to read this. It's on my teleprompter because this is too hard to explain off the cuff, so I wrote it out. This summer's been exceedingly difficult. Dad was in an ICU suffering from pneumonia and sepsis after dealing with a host of neurological issues this summer that we believe stem from CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome due to decades of mold exposure. We don't have a better explanation for his neurological symptoms at the moment other than spiritual attacks. He's been suffering for the last number of years with unexplainable neuropathy and weakness amongst other symptoms, but they worsened this summer after he cleaned out his parents' basement after his dad, my grandpa, passed away. We weren't able to communicate with Dad really all of September. During the end of the pneumonia, he was diagnosed with critical illness polyneuropathy, which we're hoping is critical illness myopathy, which is bad enough. That's been heartbreaking and brutal on top of everything else. But after almost a month in the ICU, he's been moved out to a less urgent floor. Praise God for that. We're still in the midst of this, but now we're seeing improvements daily. The timeline for his full recovery is hard to tell at the moment, and I'll update everyone when we have more information. My family's asking for prayers. Like I said, this summer's been exceedingly difficult and terrifying. Dad's condition is complicated by the fact he can't take most medications without suffering from severe paradoxical reactions, which limits treatment options. Like I mentioned, I believe there's a spiritual element at play here. I think a lot of people have felt it in the last few weeks and months. It's been hitting my dad and my family hard this summer. In August, the day Dad was brought to a hospital by ambulance, my newborn Audrey was also brought to a hospital by ambulance within hours of each other. It was unbelievable. This was the second time this summer we had brought Audrey to the hospital after she almost died from near heart failure at 6 weeks old. That is exceedingly rare, and they couldn't find a cause for. She was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, which seems to have resolved, praise God. But it's not something that happens. This was late July after Dad and I recorded some episodes of the call-in show together. Everything went just really downhill fast after that. Every single day this summer and now fall has been like watching a movie. Our family's relying heavily on the Lord through this and seeing miracles around us. We are. And I'm also aware that God uses everything for good. So eventually we'll see why this is happening or what comes of it. But Mom and I in particular really wanted to reach out and ask for prayers to help everyone get through this, especially for my dad and for my mom, but also for the nurses and doctors taking care of him, my brother, and family and friends who have come to support us. I miss my dad. My brother misses his dad. My mom misses her best friend and husband. Oh, man. I thought I wasn't going to cry during this.
Yeah, I definitely pray for their family as well, I can definitely tell that they have a lot of genetic family conditions, right? And of course, it's not just only affecting Jordan Peterson, but it's affecting Michaela and, of course, her family and their family as well. So, of course, I just pray for them that they get better, man, because I know that they changed my lives. They changed people's lives in general for the better, And I'm glad that I was able to stop by to his channel one day and just suddenly watch his videos and, everything clicked for me.
Well, he's hopefully recovering. And like I said, I'll keep people updated. He has a team of people, including myself, continuing his mission, including Peterson Academy, and will be releasing his We Who Wrestle with God tour to everyone on YouTube, which he's wanted to do for a long time. And given we think there's a spiritual element at play here, we believe the right way to fight back is to keep going and push harder, if anything. Life isn't necessarily supposed to get easier when you're doing the right thing, and I can see God's hand throughout this, but it's a lot to handle. My family agreed or wanted to delay updating everybody because a lot has happened over the last few months, and we were hoping he would recover faster and we would see bigger improvements sooner and have better news. And it was really a near-death experience for a long time. So we've been just dealing with this one day at a time. We still are. It's been overwhelming, but it looks like, and we're praying that things are headed in the right direction. He's out of the ICU. So that's the main thing. He's out of the ICU. Like I said, praise God for that. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for the prayers. Thank you to everybody who's reached out. I'll be back on YouTube maybe in the next month or so, depending on.
Overall, yeah, definitely good update that she did. She did another one. So I think she did 3 of these ones. This one's from December.
Hey guys, brief update on my dad, because I know a lot of you have reached out and asked and have been waiting for one, as have we, obviously. I don't have a lot to say because everything's been slow. He's still very unwell, but he's not in the hospital. I'm seeing him every day for hours, which is really nice. We're working with great specialists and giving him more time to recover. I'm hopeful he will recover with time. When I posted the last video, I didn't know if he would recover at all. It was really scary, and I'm hopeful now, but it's still early on and he's still quite unwell, and we're still really not sure what's going on, whether it's an immune system issue, neurological, both. So I wanted to give an update that was like, things are really bad, but they're not as bad as they were a month ago or 2 months ago. So that's the update. I wish things would just go back to normal, but they're not there yet. Thank you so much for your prayers. We need them. I'll let you guys know as soon as I can if anything changes. Hopefully he's on the road to recovery. As for me, I haven't really been online, or at least posting, because the situation is stressful and sad, and I don't really want to get on a camera and pretend everything's okay. So I've basically been offline really since last February with the pregnancy. Then Audrey, my 7-month-old now, getting incredibly sick, then dad getting sick. Audrey, on the other hand, is doing really well. Praise God for that. We still aren't sure what happened. Like, she almost died from a heart issue, even though her heart is normal. She was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, and that seems to have been a one-off freak incident that hasn't repeated. So like I said, praise God for that. Jury's still out if there's a long-term problem that they just can't find. I'll probably be paranoid about it until she's 20. But so far, at least that's under control. The plan for content is to start the podcast up in January. I've recorded 2 episodes that I would really like to release and catch everyone up on the last year of what my family's been going through. I plan to do a pregnancy episode about all things pregnancy and postpartum when I was pregnant, but it was such a difficult pregnancy that I will get into on that episode that I couldn't record the episode. But I'll catch up on that and do a few Q&As and launch the podcast hopefully in January. That's the plan anyway. I'm not going to do another dad update until something changes more significantly with him, hopefully for the better. But as soon as he's doing better, like I said, you guys will know. The only thing I've really been able to keep up with throughout this period is Peterson Academy, which has been going incredibly well. I'll do a dedicated video on that too, because I haven't gone into details, and I'm really proud of what we've built. We have 70 courses now, like 8-hour courses. There are a couple of 12-hour courses. There's one 6-hour course, but we have 70 courses now on the platform. We launched with 18. We launched our mobile app about 3 weeks ago. We hired some more people. The whole team, really, everyone working is super motivated to provide great education and a community, and they're all really good, hardworking people. We've been working on this more than full-time since 2022, and we now have a core group of people that we spent years looking for that are basically 1 in 10,000 rare, maybe more, extremely talented. It's hard to find very talented people. So Peterson Academy is going incredibly well, and it's going to continue going incredibly well, Lord willing. Dad's spending his time actually watching the courses now, which is very cool. And he likes them, which is a good thing. As for my content, I'm going to start posting videos, I think, like I said, in January, I hope. And I know I said that last time and planned to, but I've been too stressed out. But things are a bit better now, and I miss it, so I'll do my best. I hope you guys are doing well, and I can't thank you enough for the outpour of prayers and messages after the last video. They have been so helpful to me. I don't even have words for how helpful they've been. I know they've helped my mom too. That's really made a difference this year, getting through a whole bunch of crazy health things. So thank you guys. Like I said, I can't describe how helpful people reaching out has been, even if I haven't responded. There have been thousands and thousands of messages, and it's been really nice. So I will talk to you guys soon. I also have an announcement too that I will put out in a few days that I'm excited about. It's nothing to do with dad, but something I've been wanting to do for a very long time that I'm going to launch. It's not a product. It's more exciting than a product. So I'll talk to you about that very soon.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a good update. They're definitely doing well. This is, I think the last one. So this was 12 days ago, right? Um, this one's 35 minutes, but of course, we're not gonna go too deep into this, but of course, she's still doing podcasts to this day, and then, like I said, right? So. Let's read this first. We figured out that dad was in a psych med, induced neurological injury, has been suffering from akathisia. So, of course, it was back to that video, right? Where, of course, he talked about more of the benzodiazepines and how long-term use can cause like a very lot of side effects, especially for his age. It's been 6 years since any psych medications, but last summer his symptoms started after a flare-up likely induced by mold, which is SIRS and stress. It was complicated by pneumonia and associated sepsis a month later. It's been horrible. Neurological injuries from psych meds are far more common than people know. I made this video to explain why they are and what akathisia is, because they're not talked enough. They're not talked about enough. They're misdiagnosed, nearly impossible to treat, and hidden from the pharmaceutical industry. I don't plan on making another update about my dad. It's just my feeling out and myself. There's nothing more to say about it until I get things better. I'll be jumping up and down about psych med injury. Awareness from now on span of my health as well, and it's devastating. Prayers are still appreciated. So yeah. Even this one, right? Psych meds. If you're taking psych med, particularly benzodiazepine long term, right? And are stable. Don't feel pressure to taper it, right? I mean, any psych meds, there's other ones, SSRIs, the SNRIs, those TCAs, antidepressants in general, right? You can't abruptly stop them. Long-term use can cause like serotonin syndrome. Lots of, like there's black box warnings on this benzodiazepine. I don't know if it's usually antipsychotics, but I think benzodiazepines as well, right? That can be definitely a big part, and that can lead to this. So of course, let's watch this and see how we can react to it.
Hey guys, this is a video update on Dad's health, as well as a much longer portion of information about what he's suffering from, what a lot of people are suffering from, unfortunately, and what my experience with these issues was. These updates are not fun for me. They're really stressful, and I would have updated you guys sooner, but he's still been really sick, and he got worse over the last few months, and I'm 25 weeks pregnant, and I wasn't able to record anything without weeping the whole time until this week, apparently, and it stresses out my whole family to talk about it online, and there's no point in adding stress to an already stressful situation, except that because we're public, Dad in particular, it's also stressful not talking about it because then rumors get started, and then that's all people wonder about. So, here goes. Dad's been suffering from an old neurological injury that's more recently been causing akathisia. Akathisia is the worst thing I've ever seen anyone go through. That sounds dramatic, but it's true. We talked about it in 2020 and 2021 when he experienced it after clonazepam injured him. And I'll explain why it's an injury
Akathisia is like you're constantly restless.
in a bit. I had a very brief experience with akathisia with symptoms that were extremely
It's definitely part of the EPS, which is extrapyramidal symptoms.
horrifying, but not as severe as his when I went through antidepressant withdrawal from Lexapro. That was just over 10 years ago. And that experience, like the withdrawal period that was really severe, lasted 2.5 years for me where I was nearly disabled. This was kind of before I had a public thing going on. That's when I just had a blog. I've linked a bunch of papers below about everything I'm going to talk about so that people watching can get scientific background information about what this is, because it's not talked about nearly enough for how catastrophic it is. In my opinion, psych med injuries and psych meds as a whole should be considered a national emergency, given 1 in 6 Americans, or possibly more depending on the stat, is on one of these medications, and long-term use appears to cause mitochondrial dysfunction that manifests as a neurological injury. I'll get into more of that in a bit too. Akathisia is a side effect that's way more common than people know, usually caused by psychiatric medications, although other medications can sometimes cause it, and so can sudden cessation from those medications. That's a huge trigger. So like suddenly stopping one of the medications that can also cause it. And sometimes people with Parkinson's can experience it too. It is intolerable discomfort that makes people want to crawl out of their skin. It's a neurological injury, really. A lot of people don't survive it, and there's no quick fix, although I'll go into how we've dealt with it before. Without videotaping me sobbing, and it seems like a bunch of my sadness this week has turned into anger, which is actually at least more enjoyable for me, but without posting a video of me sobbing, I don't know how to describe how bad it is in words, but I'm going to take a stab at it. You guys could look up videos of other people suffering with it if you want to. It's catastrophic. Before I get into it, let me be super clear. Dad has not been on a psych medication since January 2020. This recent flare-up of neurological symptoms wasn't due to new medications. That's partly why we had no idea what was going on for about 6 months. We went to specialists, obviously, and it was misdiagnosed repeatedly, which is super common. Then he got pneumonia and sepsis, and obviously that's a whole thing to recover from too, and dangerous, you know. This year's just been terrible. This recent flare-up that started last August was likely due to the stress of both of his parents, my grandparents, dying last year, moving countries, selling his home, and mold exposures.
Yeah, so definitely she faced a lot, right? And she didn't know this at the time, right? So,
which was enough to trigger a recurrence of neurological symptoms, like what he experienced in 2020, 2021, something we obviously didn't think was possible after 5.5 years away from these psych medications. But I've talked to psychiatrists who say they have patients that experience this. This has been unbelievably hard on my family. Every day for the last year has been hell. I haven't been posting podcasts regularly online because until a few days ago, I've cried every single day. My brother's stressed out. My mom is stressed. I mean, it's impacting so many people. And of course, my dad, you know, mom's, thank goodness, such a strong person. And thank God for faith. If it weren't for my dad and our love for him and the strength of our family and how we've been through so many health problems, you almost adapt. Now you don't because it's too awful, but like we've got good communication skills and we're closer if anything now. Otherwise, this would have just crushed us. I've certainly been walking around in a state of panic for almost a year now. To make pregnancy hormones definitely don't help that. And then to make matters worse, I don't even want to mention this really because I don't want to give it any attention, but some journalist online reached out to me trying to pin Dad's symptoms on stem cell treatments, which is so dumb it's hard to fathom. And I responded, which was stupid. You should just never respond to a journalist, but I was like, hey, I really appreciate you looking into doctors, but like, that's not what's going on with Dad. I'm going to talk about what's going on with Dad. But it just isn't associated with stem cells. And he ignored me. And anyway, that kind of thing is annoying, obviously. So Dad had stem cell IVs over the years a couple times to see if they can help with neurological pins and needles and pain and like sensitivities and things. And I mentioned in one of my videos that last summer in June, he had a stem cell IV from a specialist. This is a specialist I don't know. He was like hooked up with him from one of his friends, a great specialist, but it's not someone I'm connected to. He stayed in a moldy hotel for that treatment, and that brought back symptoms. It wasn't the stem cell IV. He's had hordes of those. And trying to link the stem cell IV in June to sepsis from pneumonia in October is insane. Anyway, sepsis happens within days of an infection. So not only are we dealing with missing my dad, pregnancy for me, taking care of him, and being really sad, but we also have to deal with morons on the internet. So that sucks. The problem this year likely was that because we didn't know stress and mold exposure, stress really too, could re-trigger old neurological injuries. It was misdiagnosed a bunch, and then medications and supplements that were used by a few of the doctors in hospitals worsened symptoms. Enough that it got to the point where we're like, oh, we know what akathisia is. Oh no. So now that we know what it is and have proper doctors, it can be carefully healed again, like it has before. And it is. So thank God for that. It's just horrifying, and it's so infuriating that these sensitivities, this damage that can cause severe symptoms like this, can last for so long after stopping psych meds and then apparently be re-triggered. People online, this is another thing I'm frustrated about. If I come off as like frustrated in this, I apologize. Like I said, I probably tried to channel. Oh no. Okay. I was like, I can do this without crying. I probably tried to channel. Wow. Well, I'm not channeling very well right now, but I've been trying to channel my like sadness because I've been so sad into anger because I'm tired of being sad. But this like neurological injury, calling it an addiction, is so stupid. Dad doesn't fall into that category. We've made that clear so many times. He quit smoking and drinking when he was 27. He just isn't that. Instead, he falls into the unfortunately common category of people who were prescribed psych meds long term. And it's not like they were prescribed for no reason. Like severe, crippling, life-ruining depression, the kind where you can't get off the couch for 30 years, runs in my family. Okay.
Yeah, and I like how she's being very honest, vulnerable, and open to talk about it, which I definitely like, respect, right?
It's not the kind of depression you can normally diet and exercise away. Like people like to say that. They like to look at depressed people and go, why don't you eat better and exercise more? And it's like, I'm in hell. Like, you think that's going to help? Although obviously that was before we knew about only eating meat, which did help. But in a really complicated way. Like people didn't, who's going to guess that? So it wasn't something you could get rid of from cutting processed foods, for instance. Myself, my dad, my grandpa, my great-grandpa had it. My great-grandpa was left on a doorstep, so I can't imagine he came from a very stable family. Ugh. Okay, I have a Kleenex now. So where was I? Depression. So when dad started to be badly impacted by depression in the 90s, and he said he had it since he was a kid. He was impacted enough that he was having a hard time lecturing. He took an SSRI. We were told it was a genetic serotonin problem, and antidepressants were basically a vitamin for a serotonin deficiency, which is still what people are told, even though that has been completely debunked. And when I started having symptoms when I was a kid of OCD, suicidal thoughts, extreme anxiety, anger, my psychiatrist, who was assigned to kids with autoimmune disorders, like so many people with autoimmune disorders on psych meds, put me on Celexa at the time, and that was eventually changed to Lexapro. And they helped a lot initially. I thought they saved my life for years, like a life from hellish depression. And so did dad. 1 out of 5 or 6, like I said, people in the US is on a psychiatric medication. They're not addicts. They don't even know these medications are dependence forming because their doctors say they're not. And the dangers surrounding these medications certainly aren't well known, even now. That's a large part of the reason for this video. I was like, I don't want to talk about it really, but it's happening and it's so bad that people need to know because it's not rare. And dependence forming, to clarify that, it's different than what people think of when they think of addiction. It means your brain changes to adapt to the medication. So if you pull it out, especially quickly, your brain can't handle it. It's not that you want to take it or enjoy taking it. It could be causing severe side effects. This is what happened with dad. He started getting akathisia on clonazepam, but pulling it out is impossible and it worsens it. It's a terrible situation. But this was 6 years ago, Anyway, apparently that differentiation between being on a psych med and being an addict is too complicated for most people, or at least for the people complaining on the internet. But I thought it should be addressed anyway. And I'm someone who honestly looks at classic addicts, say heroin, and thinks they must be suffering and it's a complicated issue and I feel bad for them and there's more to it, in my opinion, than someone who just took drugs and is an addict. I think there's likely physiological issues at play for classic addictions. But dad's not in that category. So now I guess I can talk about what akathisia felt like to me. And when dad recovers, he can talk about his experience if he wants to. For me, and I don't want to get into details more than that really, because it's too hard on my family. And I don't want to. So my experience with akathisia, for me, it hit for the first time 2 weeks after I stopped Lexapro in 2015. After going on a ketogenic diet that I kind of randomly went on when I went on an elimination diet that just happened to be ketogenic, I cut out almost everything, like meat and vegetables. And that put my depression into remission. My depression went away. I could feel it go away one day, about 3 months into the diet. And I thought, I'm never going to take another pill again. And I stopped everything. That depression, even on the Lexapro, was so debilitating that when I started doing dietary intervention, testing it out and removing things, I focused on my arthritis, which was crippling. I had joints replaced from it because I thought that was the easier thing to fix. And that there was no way dietary intervention was going to touch something as severe as that depression that runs in my family. That's how you know the Lexapro wasn't fixing the depression, because I felt the depression go away on the ketogenic paleo diet I was on, kind of like meat and vegetables and a bit of fruit, while on Lexapro. So I stopped Lexapro over a 2-week period, which is basically cold turkey, which was crazy after taking it for 11 years. But this was 2015, and even now doctors will wean people down in 2 to 4 weeks. If you have a doctor that suggests you wean down off of a long-term psych med in 2 to 4 weeks, run. That can literally give people neurological injuries, and that's what happened to my family from pulling the medication out.
Especially because when the time 2 to 4 weeks is the ideal time it takes for it to get its therapeutic effect. But if you just abruptly just stop it, of course, like, the side effects is going to be very much worse.
Too fast. Although we were getting injured on the medication too. People need to hyperbolic taper, and I have links below to it, which is roughly a 10% reduction over every new dose. So if you go from 20 milligrams to 18 milligrams, then the next reduction is smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And sometimes that takes years, and sometimes people still can't do it. So I developed insane sensitivities to food, light, sound, stress, smells, chemicals, vitamins, supplements. Like, my body freaked out. This is why I eventually started only eating meat. That wasn't for fun. It was because I was insane. And getting to the meat diet took me 2 years to figure out. And I suffered quite a bit, even on the paleo and ketogenic diet during that 2.5 year period. So the akathisia and the bad psych med injury symptoms felt like I was overwhelmed with a sense of impending doom that was stronger than anything you can naturally feel. And I know that because, for instance, last summer I was in the hospital with my newborn, and we thought she was going to die. And that was the worst thing I've ever experienced. But the stress response I experienced during antidepressant withdrawal was almost hallucinogenic. Like, it wasn't a natural stress response. That's, I guess, the best way I can describe it. It felt like I was falling into a volcano while being chased by a bear. Like, I had the physical sensation sometimes that I was falling. And there were days when the only thing that felt soothing was wrapping my arms around me. This was like more of the akathisia symptoms, and rocking back and forth to try to calm down, or stamping my feet, or like shaking my hands. It felt like severe restless legs, but also in my arms and body. Everything I saw was pixelated. I couldn't see color properly. I felt like I was in the upside down in the show Stranger Things. I couldn't listen to music. Music hurt my ears. There were days I couldn't watch TV even. I couldn't lay in bed and watch TV. I just had to lay in a dark room and try to not panic. There wasn't a comfortable position I could get into. Light hurt my eyes, sound hurt my ears. My sense of smell was heightened. I sprouted full-on allergies to things I'd never been allergic to. At the time, I was so unaware that stopping Lexapro could cause these symptoms that I thought it was my autoimmune disorder somehow, or sudden extreme food sensitivities because I had limited my diet to a paleo keto diet, which obviously doesn't make any sense.
Lexapro is an SSRI, by the way.
You don't cut things out and then when you reintroduce them, you hallucinate. Like, that's not a thing that happens. The main thing that flared up my neurological injury were foods and preservatives in foods. And then for dad, his symptoms, when when they got really bad years ago and more recently, were more severe than that. We're not on an all-meat diet for fun. We're on an all-meat diet because we've been left with extremely long-lasting sensitivities and neurological injuries from these medications. And Dad's more sensitive than me, maybe because he was older or on SSRIs longer, and because of the clonazepam for sure. So that's a brief description of my experience with akathisia and psych med withdrawal. It lasted 2.5 years for me, and it only started to go away when I switched from the paleo, dairy-free keto diet to only eating meat. So in the middle of that antidepressant withdrawal years ago now, after a period of not sleeping from a reaction to a preservative called sodium metabisulfite, Dad was prescribed clonazepam. And most of you guys know this. He didn't take it for fun. He took it because he hadn't slept in like 3 weeks. And I know that's true because I had a similar, we both ate the same thing that had sodium metabisulfite in it. And I had a similar response, but very horrifying, less severe though, where I threw up and then I didn't sleep well for about 3 weeks. And it was horrible, horrible. He was pale, near anaphylaxis, couldn't really breathe. That was one of those weird allergies that popped up that neither of us had before stopping medication. I didn't have food allergies before stopping those meds. Neither did he. Insomnia so severe you do not sleep can be part of having a psych med-induced neurological injury. Glutamate skyrockets when GABA systems are damaged because GABA is what counteracts glutamate. And we don't really understand a lot of what's happening, but severe insomnia is discussed a lot amongst people with psych med injuries. I had a hard time sleeping for years. Even after my antidepressant withdrawal, neurological injury went away with the lion diet. I still have a hard time sleeping. Like that's still my probably most sensitive area, although it's manageable. I'm fine. But I use white noise, a cold room, an eye mask, earplugs. Something's still off. And I'm sure it's from the lingering damage SSRIs did. Dad's doctor prescribing him clonazepam for insomnia due to the undiagnosed SSRI withdrawal, or more aptly described as neurological injury, injured him further. And that's how he ended up with full-blown akathisia for about 2 years after realizing the clonazepam was causing issues after his doctor raised the dose of clonazepam when my mom was diagnosed with cancer and given 8 months to live. All this stuff sounds crazy dramatic, but over the last 6 years, I've talked to hundreds and read thousands of stories of people who experience injuries from psych medications that sound like that. And these aren't out of the ordinary for those people. I wouldn't go into all this detail, except I really do want you guys to understand that as horrible as this is, what's worse is this isn't rare. People who get injured by these don't have a voice, really. They're too sick to have a voice. But I've talked to and been sent stories from thousands of people that are stuck in this hell. SSRI prescriptions and benzodiazepine prescriptions long-term are super common. And the majority of people who take them, especially long-term, have withdrawal or neurological injury from them. It's almost always misdiagnosed as recurrence of their symptoms because doctors will use the same words to describe it. And then these poor people end up on 2 or 3 more medications to stabilize their worsening mental illness when it's really neurological damage from the medications themselves.
And even if it's like even psych meds in general, like if you take one or more, if they interact with each other, it just makes it worse. So I definitely understand where she's coming from,
Most psychiatrists are completely inequipped to handle this. They don't even know about this. They certainly aren't taught about this in medical school. Most people don't know it exists. When it happens in families, like a lot of the time these people are outcast because people can't understand why they're acting the way they're acting. And I'll be the first to say, when I first took Celexa, it felt like it worked. I felt my shoulders drop. I felt like I could breathe again deeply. I stopped panicking. I stopped having suicidal thoughts and my OCD disappeared. That was when I was 11, but I remember it vividly. And I remember how I felt like before I started taking them. But by the time I was 13, I was certainly still depressed. I stayed on them because I thought, oh my gosh, if this is how I feel with medication, imagine how bad it is without it. But what ended up happening is I got more and more mentally ill over the years, was diagnosed with bipolar type 2, had a seizure from Wellbutrin when that was added in, suffered from severe restless legs that was really intolerable, that I thought was part of having an autoimmune disorder or something. I didn't know it was associated with SSRIs. And I just ended up getting worse and worse and worse. I just always thought I would be even worse without the medications. That wasn't true. What I needed to focus on was mitochondrial health, really. So I'm going to get into that now. Mitochondrial dysfunction is like ketogenic research. In 5 years, it's going to be mainstream. Like ketogenic therapies are moving into the mainstream, thank goodness. There's mounting evidence that dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, long COVID, and those weird chronic diseases that people get that are hard to treat and kind of fringe, but most definitely exist, like chronic fatigue, Lyme, POTS, MCAS, like those kind of things, that have this large array of seemingly unrelated symptoms that include things like chronic fatigue, depression, brain fog, anxiety, chronic pain, lightheadedness, weird chemical and food sensitivities are due to mitochondrial dysfunction. Because that impacts your whole body and your brain. 10% of us by weight are mitochondria. So when I talk about neurological injuries, what I'm talking about is mitochondrial dysfunction that manifests like a neurological injury. This is pretty cutting edge research, and I've linked papers below so people can read more about it. In the previous kind of announcement videos, I talked about how whatever was going on with Dad had been diagnosed as SIRS. That's still true. He definitely has SIRS. Otherwise, the mold exposures he experienced wouldn't have caused neurological symptoms. That's chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and it's almost like mold-induced illness. I think that the genetic predisposition to mold illness is likely what caused the severe mental illness that ran in my family that was then treated with medication. I talked about how it felt spiritual, and it does. It's been hellish. I know, like other people going through really stressful periods with sick family.
Okay, yeah, so it is confirmed that he has SIRS, right? And the fact that she has like a lot of mental health disorders, issues, history in her family, right? I can tell that like there's definitely been a lot of trauma that has definitely been repressed, right? And she has been, tried so many ways to kind of like heal from it. And I definitely kind of like respect her for that. And
like know what those periods of time are like, and like it's hellish. My daughter last summer was hospitalized the same day as my dad. That seems odd. There's a biological basis for what's going on with Dad, and we finally know what it is, but I do think there's a spiritual element, or is. I'd also say if mentally ill, desperate people are given medication that's supposed to ease their suffering that ends up nearly killing them when they stop, or even while they're on it and then they can't stop, I would say that's evil. Have you guys heard of post-SSRI sexual dysfunction? It's way more common than people realize too. And podcasters are starting to talk about it, which is good, but it causes seemingly permanent genital numbness and anhedonia, so emotional numbness. It makes people suicidal because they can't feel anything. And that can happen from short-term use to some people of these medications. Finasteride is one of them, SSRIs, any medication that can cause things like that, akathisia, PSSD, that level of suffering is evil, I think. I do think our family has been attacked spiritually because I cannot understand the level of suffering that I've been through, let alone my dad's been through, and my whole family without it making more sense through a spiritual lens. Oh, thank God I'm a Christian. Anyway, away from the spiritual part. So the association between SIRS, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, or basically mold-induced illness, ketogenic diets, like the carnivore diet, and psych med-induced neurological injury, how do they connect together? Mitochondria. Mold causes mitochondria to hibernate, to protect themselves, and shut down, which causes this weird array of symptoms I talked about. Psych meds cause mitochondrial dysfunction. I've linked the papers that manifest as a neurological injury. And a ketogenic diet gives mitochondria an alternate fuel that helps them heal and helps them work, which is why it's so massively useful and why we're just eating meat. I'm going to put this video out. People are going to tell me I'm reaching, but this is now well-established research. Mitochondrial dysfunction research is blowing up right now. I'm going to talk about it more on my podcast because it's promising. It's really promising. And understanding what's wrong is really the only way to figure out health problems. Like I said, there are papers linked below, so you don't have to just take my word for it. And I would have made this video shorter, but I wanted to address everything I could. In a fit of frustration and anger at this situation and how unfair it is, I put a website together that I linked below called prescribed-harm.com, which goes into the research about psychiatric medications and what they're doing to people. And if you're watching this video and have been injured by these medications, you can write your story on that website too, and I'll post it. Or maybe that website will be useful to explain to family members what's going on, or doctors who don't usually know what's going on, or leave a comment below to show people this isn't uncommon. These injured people are so hurt, like I said, that they can't usually have their story told because they're just trying to survive. And they're basically disabled and traumatized and gaslit and misdiagnosed. I'm going to be jumping up and down for a while, probably until this is dealt with properly, about the dangers these medications produce, until things are changed, or at least until it's common knowledge that people need to be aware of this before they start the medication. Pharmaceutical companies rename these neurological injuries and psych med side effects and use language to hide the symptoms. Like there's malevolence here too. Like calling akathisia restlessness may cause restlessness. Calling akathisia restlessness makes me want to hurt people. And maybe that's pregnancy hormones talking, but it's criminal really. There are no long-term studies on these medications, yet most people take them for more than 5 years and are told that they're safe, or at least safer than their original mental issue. Actually, there's one long-term study, and you know what it shows? That 60% of people have a recurrence of symptoms. That's what they got from the study, and need to go back on the medication. You know what's stupid about that? They don't differentiate between recurrence and withdrawal. And withdrawal is almost always misdiagnosed as recurrence, even though the array of symptoms with withdrawal is generally way more severe and includes pain syndromes and sensitivities and new symptoms. They're just like, well, you just got worse. Nope. The industry is so crooked. It's a travesty that now that there's actual solid research linking ketogenic diets to improving mental disorders, treating them, giving the brain the energy that it needs to not be sick. I linked metabolicminds.com below, which is a great site about ketogenic diets and mental illnesses, run by scientists. And that diet, or the carnivore diet, should be first-line treatment for mental illness, given they will work and actually treat the energy deficiency that's causing mental illness, but especially because these psych medications cause mitochondrial dysfunction long-term that manifests as a neurological injury and is very difficult.
Yeah, she says something about, of course, the keto diet, the carnivore diet, and it can improve your energy levels. I definitely was on this diet, right? And, it definitely, I felt much more healthier. I felt much more happier, right? I had, like, a lot of energy. And I felt like life was so good when I was on that carnivore diet,
If not impossible to treat without time and lifestyle interventions like ketogenic diet, sun, sleep, no stress, like serious stress regulation. So to end this rant, and apologies, I can see it's been 33 minutes, but I really did want to cover everything because it's a lot. So prayers are much appreciated still. And all this suffering, we hope, leads to more awareness so other people can avoid this. Withdrawal is a silly name for what happens to people, because withdrawal should be solved by the original medication, right? If you're in withdrawal, you go back on the original medication, you're not in withdrawal anymore, all your symptoms go away. That's not what happens here. This is a neurological injury. I don't want to promise another update. I'm grumpy and pregnant, and I don't want to be on the hook publicly for another update. I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about mitochondrial dysfunction and psych med, this travesty of psych med injuries. But I've been barely surviving with the pregnancy hormones and stress. Thank goodness for my husband, who's just a rock. But I'm not sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. At least this week, it appears I'm not crying constantly. Being in the second trimester probably helps that. But that's it for updates about dad until he's back. Now that we know it's a neurological injury, and we know we need time for him to recover, and we can speed it up by not provoking a reaction. Like I said, prayers are much appreciated for my dad and for my brother, my mom, and me, and all the people helping us to help him through this. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, but people need to know these medications and what they can do to people, especially long-term, but not just long-term. And they need to be aware of these before taking a medication. So check out everything I've linked below if you want. I spent a decent amount of time trying to find good articles. And my recent study that I posted, this being done on the carnivore versus keto versus standard American diet and rheumatoid arthritis and IBD, run by a research team, is linked below, and prescribed-harm.com for more information on how to safely taper to avoid neurological injury and to read other people's experiences. So thank you guys for listening, and thank you for the support. And I'm really sorry for anyone else damaged by these horrible medications, but there's hope. You can recover with time. Ketogenic diets are unbelievably helpful, and it's about avoiding making it worse, because bodies and brains do want to recover. So thanks for listening, and I'll see some of you on my podcast.
I don't think I had any happiness at all for 3 years, pretty much. It was dire. Well, my wife, she spent a year hovering on the brink of death in a variety of different ways. Before that, my daughter had catastrophic.
Yeah, shout out to Jordan Peterson for making these types of videos. Like I said, all these videos that I put up here and we watched, link in the description down below. Overall, I hope I can see Jordan Peterson back to where he is at again. Like I said, give prayers to her, and yeah, honestly, definitely liking this video too, right? Of course, if you aren't, especially in his situation, just be careful about these medications that I talked about, and yeah, it's definitely impacts the kind of like the pharmaceutical industry, right? And they just end up just want what's one thing, and it's just money, right? So yeah, I definitely, yeah, very interesting video, very interesting videos that I definitely react. But like I said, I hope I can hope Michaela Peterson, Jordan B. Peterson, hope they get back into normal conditions now, because I know that like these people, especially Jordan Peterson, you know, helped me a lot in my life, as well as Michaela Peterson putting me on the carnivore diet and doing my research, and I definitely would thank her for that, right? So these people changed my life, and I hope they get better, and I just pray, right? Just pray that everything gets better. But yeah, anyways, thanks for watching this video. If you do enjoy this video, leave a like, comment, share, subscribe. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. The links are in the description as well as the videos. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.